everybody says they want to be their own boss, but most people don't really take very many positive steps to look into it. And I don't tell people that it's for everybody. It's probably not for a lot of people, but I really give you credit for taking a step to really do the research, do the homework, and then make a decision based on what you learn. And utilizing the resources of the Women's Business Center and ECDI is a great place to start. You find some tremendously talented people that want to help and have a lot of experience. So I give you all a lot of credit for starting that process. This particular workshop we called Employee to Entrepreneur with a Safety Net. And the safety net, in my opinion, is the homework, the research that we do before we make a decision to go into business. If you work with somebody like myself and look into franchising, my company itself is actually a franchise, and there's a very clear system that I help guide people through in order to help them get the facts and the data so they can really make a smart decision. And sometimes people go through the process and realize that maybe this isn't the right time for them to go into business ownership. Maybe their finances aren't quite in order. Maybe their business plan isn't quite developed. Maybe they're just not sure enough about it. And I tell people, don't rush. Don't rush into it. Right now, there's been an explosion of entrepreneurship. Some of it has to do with the pandemic that we've been through. There's other factors involved, but nobody should rush into it until they're ready. And there really is a right way to go about doing the research. So in this first slide, we talk about 3 different ways to go into business ownership. You can buy an existing business, you can build your own business from scratch, or you can choose a franchise. Franchise is really just one of the 3 business formats. Sometimes people think there's something different about it or something special about it. It's really just one of the options. Let me see. If you choose to start your own business, you're in total control. And I know many people that come to ECDI and Women's Business Center, that's what they want to do. And thank goodness that we have entrepreneurs with a dream. We have people that have started companies that have become huge, enormous companies and changed our lives. You think about Amazon, and you think about Facebook, and you think about Elon Musk at Tesla, and those kinds of things. And our media loves to talk about it. Of course, that's not your average company by a long shot, but the advantages you see here, I think I also want to make sure that everybody takes a look on the right column and realizes that there's challenges or disadvantages as well. You're completely on your own. If you think about it, if you're starting a business, first of all, it's harder to do the research even before you begin, because your competitors probably aren't going to want to give you a lot of information. You can do the best you can to study the market and try to be prepared, but you don't really have too many people to turn to that are in that specific business. Financing can be a challenge. Fortunately, ECDI and WBC can help with that. Starting from scratch tends to be a little bit slower startup. So what some people forget is that they need not only the cash to start the business, but they need the cash to ramp up that business. You don't open up and find that you're successful overnight. It takes some time. Some businesses may take months. There are some businesses that may take a year before you break even. And that doesn't make it a bad business. An example would be senior care, the kind of business where you provide care to an older adult in their home. That kind of business has a reputation for being a very, very slow start. You've got to build relationships with the medical community, with nurses, with hospitals, with a lot of other people before you begin to get referrals. So it can be a slow start, but it can also be a very, very successful business 1, 2, 3 years in, once you've really built it up. And it's the kind of business that when you decide to exit, it will sell for a really nice multiple of your revenue. So it's a good business, but people have to be prepared that they got to keep paying their bills while they're getting the business up and running. Buying a franchise, definitely advantages and disadvantages. You can read these yourself. To me, the biggest thing is kind of in the middle, lower failure rate. And there's no magic to that. People ask me all the time, why do franchise businesses succeed at a higher rate than a startup business? And I think it's pretty simple. One, people do their homework in advance. If you're going to look at franchising, you're going to probably work with somebody like me. You're going to have several conversations with the franchise company, and then you're going to have a lot of conversations with franchise owners who own that exact franchise. And that gives you a chance to really understand what they're doing every day to be successful, or what their challenges are, and maybe they can help you avoid mistakes that they made along the way. So I think that accounts for the higher success rate that you find in franchises. There also is, franchises tend to outperform comparable businesses. Use an example, maybe a landscape business. A franchise landscape business typically performs 25 to 50% better than an independent business. Why is that? The franchise will have business systems that they've developed over many years. They've made the mistakes, so you don't have to, and they're going to share those systems and their knowledge with you. I think that is a major factor. People seem to have a trust level with a franchise. They know it's a national company, and if it's not done right the first time, they feel more confident that somebody will take good care of them. Marketing is another aspect. Many times, an individual who owns a business is trying to do everything. They're wearing every hat. They're trying to answer the phone. They're talking to the customers. They may even be doing the actual physical work, the lawn care or whatever the business is. With franchises, they will tell you that they don't want owners that are going to work in the business. That landscape company doesn't want somebody who's going to go out and cut grass and trim trees. They want you working on the business. So they want you to make sure that all the business systems are being implemented and the marketing is being done properly with the franchisor's help. You're going to supervise your team. You're going to build a team, probably have a manager and technicians, and you're going to supervise those people so that your job is to oversee the business, oversee the manager, drive business by being involved in the community. That might mean being active at the chamber. It might mean joining a networking group. It might mean getting involved in a couple community organizations and schools so that word gets out about your business. And many, many times with independent businesses, the individual is so bogged down trying to do everything by themselves that they can't really work on the business and grow the business. And I think that's a big difference with franchises. There are some disadvantages. I think it's kind of funny when it says there's only 3,800 franchises. So I tell people, if we can't find a franchise that matches your budget and your interests and your goals out of 3,800, then I think maybe there's another problem we got to think about. But maybe you would say less less options than starting from scratch where you can do anything that you want to do. All of these things can be looked at as a disadvantage or an advantage. For instance, one of the categories that says territory restrictions. So if you own that franchise and your territory, let's say, is Reynoldsburg and Pickerington, that's your market, and you're going to market and work in that area, and you can't market in Dublin or Hilliard unless you buy those territories. So that's the disadvantage, but the advantage is that another franchise owner can't come and market in your territory. So you've got the protection, and usually the territory is going to be big enough that there's going to be plenty of businesses, plenty of individuals to serve, that you won't need to worry about being limited. Franchises tend to, I'm sorry, let me just see if there's anything else I wanted to cover here. Oh, can sell only their own products. You know, if you're in business for yourself, you make all the decisions. Franchise, if you're doing landscape, they probably don't want you painting houses. You know, they want you just doing landscaping. If you've got a retail shop that sells edible fruit like edible arrangements, they don't want you doing other things and, you know, on the side. So this is something that comes from the SBA, the Small Business Administration. And what they're saying here is that with new businesses, that's independent businesses, starting your own business, that after 2 years, 64% are still open. I don't know if that sounds good or bad to you. It doesn't sound great to me. That looked at the other way, 36% of businesses are gone after 2 years. After 5 years, 50% of businesses are still open, 50% have failed. Those are numbers from the government. Now, in contrast, my company keeps statistics, and we work only with franchises. 91% compared to 64% are open after 2 years. And after 5 years, 85% are open compared to 50% for independent businesses. And again, I don't think there's a magic formula. I think it's franchise owners tend to do more research at the front end before they make a decision to really make sure it's a good fit for them. And then secondly, they've got all that support from the franchise company. They've got systems that have been proven, they've got training, they've got support, and they've got the whole network of other franchise owners. That's something people don't think about a lot, but if your franchise has owners all over the country, those people become your support system and your advisors, and many times you'll find that you're calling them up with questions just as much as you're calling the franchise company itself. Kule, I want to stop just long enough to ask you if there's any questions or anything that I should pause.
Yeah, currently there have not been any questions so far. I'll continue to monitor over the chat and let you know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
So who buys franchises? This has really changed a tremendous amount. In my own business, if you asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have told you that almost 80% of the people that came to talk to me and people that ended up deciding to buy a franchise after they did their research, and that's my role, is to help them with the research, 80% of them were corporate types, corporate execs or high-level managers who had been downsized. So maybe they worked at Nationwide or Honda or Cardinal Health or L Brands, something like that. And when they reached many times their late 40s into their 50s, a lot of them found that they were being downsized. And unfortunately, today that has gotten even younger. I'm meeting people in their early 40s who tell me that their company really is looking for younger people, and they're finding if they don't get downsized in their 40s, their path upward has kind of slowed down, and they're not getting the raises they used to get. They're not getting the promotions they used to get. So we're seeing a younger demographic than we ever did before. The other thing we're seeing is a lot more women and a lot more minorities. And this has changed really fast in, I would say, just the last 5 or 6 years. So you see the numbers here, but I think that, to me, what's most important is that it's a much more diverse group than it used to be. As I said, it used to be that older executive type who kind of felt like his corporate career was over with, and now he or she was ready to try something new. Now, a lot of people are saying, I don't want to spend 25 years in corporate America. That's not what I want to do. I want to be in charge. I want to be in control of my own finances, my own future, make my own schedule, and be rewarded if I'm successful, at the level of my success. So we're seeing a lot of younger people who are kind of skipping all the corporate years. So this kind of repeats what I said: 71% increase in ownership among women. Still underrepresented, only about 25%. And particularly this slide on the right, 93% increase in that 20 to 39 age category. I want to talk a little bit about some of the misperceptions, and this usually leads to some questions. People are a little bit surprised. So if I asked everybody on the call, I should have done that, when you hear the word franchise, what do you think about? I think everybody, 9 out of 10 people, are going to say McDonald's, Taco Bell, Wendy's, because that's what we think of. Fast food are the franchises we think of, and that's what we see on television, and that's what we see driving to work every day. But people don't think about all the other ideas and possibilities in franchising. And if you can read this graph, it breaks it down into the categories. Retail, let me put my glasses on so I can read it a little better. Retail food, 8%. Retail products and services, 13%. Automotive, 4%. We like to talk to people about businesses that are supported by the big demographic trends, things that are going to do well now and into the future. So if you think about that, what are the things that, no matter what goes on in the economy, we know people are going to continue to need and pay for? One great example of that is anything related to healthcare. So people many times don't think about a franchise in healthcare, but there's a lot of franchises that are doing really well in healthcare, in fitness and wellness. Another category you see at the top of the chart is automotive. We got to pay for our cars when they break down. We're going to pay for it. When they need an oil change, we're going to pay for it. Those are things that are not going away. Education. Most of us, if we have kids, we will pay, no matter whether we're doing well or the economy's down a little bit, we're going to pay for things that we believe are important for our kids. And that might be after school activities that are STEM programs. It could be phys ed programs, music and art programs. But when it comes to our kids, we're going to pay for it. Another category that I've seen rise really over the last 10 years, but really got an extra jump start during COVID, was pet care. And it's almost like our kids. We will pay for our pets, and most people consider their pets like a family member, and they will spend their money to keep their pets healthy and take care of them. And pet businesses have gone up tremendously. The last category, and it kind of spans a few of these on the chart, but it's all of the services that we need in our homes. I mentioned landscaping and lawn care, but anything that takes place in the home that maybe we don't have time to do or we don't want to do ourselves. And that could be cleaning, painting, window coverings, floor coverings, you name it. But with most of us working a lot of hours now, a lot of us don't want to do that stuff that maybe our parents or grandparents did themselves. And so anything related to taking care of the home has done really well. Again, part of that is because of COVID. We've seen more people spend time and working at home, and they're noticing things, and they want to make sure to take good care of their home. Franchises are expensive. Well, I understand this one, because if we think in our mind about McDonald's and restaurants and hotels and things like that, they are expensive. Today, I have a friend that works at Wendy's, told me that to open a single Wendy's today is well over $2 million. And they don't really even want to sell a single. They want to sell it to an investor who can buy 3 or 5 or 10. And then to top it off, they're going to tell you where they want you to locate. And as you can imagine, it's probably not in a place that you want to be, because they already have them here. They don't need more Wendy's in Columbus. They may tell you that they have a shortage of Wendy's in Montana or South Dakota or Maine or something like that. And that's kind of how fast food works today. Very expensive, and you're going to pretty much go where they want you to go. Franchise investment levels are all over the place. You'll see that there's a reasonable percentage, about 11%, that are under 50,000, and that's all in and includes some working capital. And you'll see quite a range. Majority, if somebody said to me, where do you see the most interest? It's probably in that category that you see that's blue, that says 100,000 to 250,000. That's where you're going to find a high percentage of the franchises. Now, you're not going to write a check for 100,000 or 250,000. You're going to probably finance a good part of it. And if you work with ECDI or possibly a neighborhood bank, you're going to probably put in about 25 to 30% of the total amount. So if that business is 100,000, you're going to probably put in 25 to 30,000 of your own. I'll also mention that, of course, if you do work with the Women's Business Center and with ECDI, there's a lot of financing options that you probably are not going to find at your neighborhood bank. And in some cases, you're going to be able to get into your business for a smaller investment level. As I said, 25 to 30% will usually be your money. 70 to 75% will be the amount that you finance. Typical sources can be, as we talked about, a place like ECDI, a neighborhood bank, personal savings. If it's an existing business, there might be some seller financing. For those lucky enough to have a 401k or some home equity, those are common places for financing. By the way, I don't know if anybody on the call, is from the corporate world and has a substantial 401k or IRA, but there are programs now that allow people to use a portion of that with no penalty and no interest if it's invested in your business. Most of the time, the common knowledge, which is not correct, is that you're going to get a penalty if you're not, 55 or 60 or whatever the legal age to start taking money from your 401k. But the government has a program that allows you to use some of that money without penalty. So that is something to know. You do need to work with a company that knows how to do it properly so that you're following all the IRS requirements. This one may not be as relevant because I expect that a lot of you on the call are pretty far along in your decision. But a lot of people, do think that it's too risky and they don't want to go into business. And you can never eliminate all the risk. I mean, that is a fact. But that's true about anything in life. When we take a new job, we don't know if it's going to work out the way we hope it will. We don't know if that new boss is going to be as nice as he seemed or she seemed in the interview, or if that company is going to be around in a couple of years, or there's going to be some merger or acquisition, and they're maybe going to be out of business. So there's risks in everything we do in employment. There's risks when we buy a house, when we get married, anything you name, there's going to be a risk. But what's interesting is, and I talked about, yes.
Sorry to cut you off. Speaking of risk, there was a great question that was just dropped into the chat. The person directly messaged me, so I won't say their name out loud, but the person asked, should I save up my money to start my business, or is it better to finance? I feel like it is taking me forever to get started because saving is so difficult right now. I'm always questioning how I can get investment money right now so I can get started. So she's asking whether it's best to go ahead and directly finance it with 100% of her own money, as opposed to, doing what you said, using 25% and then try, to go to a bank to finance the other 75%. So could you maybe talk about the positives and negatives between the two?
Yeah, sure. And well, first of all, pretty much any business will require some investment. As I was saying on a previous slide, it might be typically 25 to 30%, and then the rest could be financed. And maybe if you work through Women's Business Center or ECDI, maybe would be a little bit less. So let's just say there's a business that's 100,000. In most cases, 25 to 30 is going to come from your own checkbook. Maybe with ECDI or WBC, slightly less. When it comes to the idea of should somebody, if they're fortunate enough to have enough money to completely finance it themselves and not have any interest, or debt payment, that's a good question. I've seen some people that believe very strongly that, hey, if I pay cash, then I'm not going to have to write a check every month to Huntington Bank or whoever does the financing for me. I have other people who feel like, no, I'm going to use the minimum amount of my own and finance the rest so that I keep that money and I can continue to have it if I need it. If I need to put a little more into the business later on, I've got it. Or if just something comes up that I need some cash, I want to preserve some of that cash. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it really depends a lot on the individual's total financial picture. Do they have other sources of income if they need it? Do they own a house maybe and have some home equity if they needed to use that? In the end, we're going to be on the line and responsible if we borrow money, whether it's from an SBA-backed loan that ECDI helps you get or Huntington Bank helps you get. If your business were to fail, and hopefully nobody's business will fail, but we know they do, some businesses do, and we're on the line. And depending on the company, if it's an independent business, you may just close the doors. If it's a franchise, or if you've leased space say with a landlord, that landlord is going to hold you responsible for that lease, at least until they can find another tenant. So there's no way to eliminate all the risks. And that's kind of one of those things that we have to get comfortable with, or we have to learn to be uncomfortable if we're gonna go forward. So I hope I answered that. If I didn't, give us some clarification in the chat box, and I'll take another shot. The last thing I wanted to say about jobs versus business, I talked about this a little bit before. The idea of job security just doesn't exist anymore. What happens is that big companies bring in consultants to talk about how to make more money for the shareholders, the stockholders. And one of the things they tell them is, you're going to be more profitable if you make the company younger. You get rid of those older people who have higher salaries, who have more healthcare costs, and maybe who are kind of drag on technology because they're not going to learn technology as fast as a younger person. And so companies downsize. And it used to be, like I said earlier, that happened in people's late 40s, 50s, 60. It's now happening when they're 40, 45 years old. And the idea of job security really is gone. And so with jobs, as you get older, they become less secure. With a business, it's the opposite. The first couple of years, you feel a lot of anxiety about it because it's brand new and you're building that business up. And it takes a while to really start to build up to a higher level. But as the business gets more mature, you can feel more confident about it. And that business is really giving you greater security, whereas the job is declining. These are businesses, I touched on this before, that do well in all kinds of economies, whether there's a downturn, whether the economy is booming. I talked about senior services. I mentioned health and wellness. I mentioned a lot of these already, actually. Hair care is on there. You know, we're going to get our hair cut if the economy is good or bad. Pet care, some B2B services such as business coaching, sales training, etc. These are businesses that people will pay for whether the economy is good or not quite so good. This is a surprise to a lot of people. You would think that if you were going into a specific franchise, they would want people with experience, but they really don't. They want people who have a general business knowledge, who are good communicators, who like to interact with people, and who will follow the system. The franchise has already developed systems. Over the years, they've made their mistakes and fixed those mistakes. And so you don't have to go through that trial and error that a lot of people go through when they start their own business. So they don't necessarily want somebody with experience. A lot of times they'll tell you they don't want people with specific industry experience, because sometimes it's hard to get them to adapt to the system that the franchise has developed. They want to do it their way instead of the way that the franchise has developed. So I think really the key is we all try to find a business that is a match for our background, our skills, and our interests, and our budget. I don't want to leave out the budget. Sometimes I've run into people who spent their career in technology, but they tell me it's not what they want to do anymore. They've done technology for 20 years, or they've done pharmaceutical sales for 20 years, and now they want to work with kids, or they want to work with older adults, or they want to work with pets. They want to make a complete change. And again, if they've got general business knowledge and they're good communicators, they can make that change. And the franchise company will train them on the specifics of the business and support them. A franchise like mine has a weekly training call, and that's pretty typical of any franchise. twice a year, we have national conferences where there's more training and a chance to get together with colleagues and exchange ideas. And many times a franchise will set up different groups, like on a regional basis. So I get together once every 2 weeks with a group of people in the Midwest to talk about what's working, what's not working, what we want to try. And so there's a lot of support involved. And to me, that's the big difference between a franchise and any other form of business, is the ongoing support and training. And so I tell people all the time, I can present. We go through a process where I try to get to understand somebody and their background, their experience, what they like, what they don't like. Then I can present some options that look like a pretty good match. And I can tell them these are good, solid companies where you'll be able to validate with owners and find out that they're making a good living, they're meeting their goals. But the key is you've got to find out, is it a good fit for you? I mentioned a couple of times earlier, landscaping. There's some great landscape companies out there. I'm only using them as an example. But just because it's a great company and somebody else loves it and is making a lot of money, it doesn't mean that it's a match for you. So the key is, during our process, is to figure out what really is a good match for you. There may be certain kind of employees that you like to work with. There may be certain kinds of customers that you prefer. You may want the kind of business that the customers come to you, and somebody else may be comfortable with a company that relies on marketing and making the phone ring and then scheduling meetings or appointments to talk about that service, with that prospective customer. So there's all kinds of businesses. They all do business differently, and it's really a question of finding out, what works for that individual. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but the franchise industry is the only business or sector that's regulated by the government, by the Federal Trade Commission. So when you begin to interact with a franchise, you get a document that they call the Franchise Disclosure Document. And sometimes they just refer to it as FDD, Franchise Disclosure Document. And you can see the kind of information that you get in that document. And if you're looking to buy an existing business or looking to start a business on your own, you got to try to figure this stuff out on your own. But there'll be a history of the company. There'll be a lot of information about the leadership of the company. There'll be an accurate breakdown on all the costs. There'll be information if there's ever been litigation against the company or any of the owners. I think it goes on to the next page. It'll describe the territory that you'd be looking at. And maybe the biggest thing is, in the middle, contact information for all the current franchisees or owners and all the past owners. So you can literally talk to as many as you want to find out, what they like, what they don't like, what they would do differently. If they've left the franchise, why did they leave? Was there anything that was a concern for them? And it's really a chance to do a tremendous amount of research and due diligence. And again, if somebody chooses to work with somebody like myself, they don't pay anything. I'm actually paid by the franchise industry for bringing them good referrals. So my role is to represent the client with the franchises and to guide them through the research process. So again, that's called the Franchise Disclosure Document. And typically everybody gets that after a few calls with the franchise company. Additional resources, I'll start again by saying that you've started the right way already by working with the WBC and ECDI. In our case, we advise people when they really are getting pretty serious and they're almost ready to make a decision, that they need to speak to an attorney. In the case of people looking at a franchise, it should be an experienced franchise attorney who understands how to read the franchise agreements and the franchise disclosure document. Funding options, we've talked about a little bit. You're starting at the right place with the Women's Business Center. A good accountant, and again, ECDI and the Women's Business Center has a professional advisory committee, and they can make recommendations to you for attorneys, accountants, and other professions that you'll need. For those that are interested in franchising, there's a couple books here that are very good. If you're specifically interested in franchising, I recommend the one on the right, Street Smart Franchising by Joe Matthews. Very good. You can probably find it at the library or get a used copy for $5 on Amazon. And for everybody that's going into business, The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Garber is a tremendous book. And interestingly, Michael Garber talks about small businesses. It's not a book about franchising, but he says people should build their small business like a franchise, that they should focus on building systems that they can bring their other people into, that explain exactly how to do the job and exactly how the business works. And he says, if you build it like a franchise, whether you're going to be a franchise or not, you'll help your business to grow. I mentioned what we do already. We basically match people with businesses that are a fit for their budget and their interests and background. My company is also a franchise, FranNet, been around for 34 years throughout the US and Canada. And we partner with ECDI, with SBDC, SCORE, SBA, and Women's Business Centers. And that is my information. And Kule, I'm hoping there's a few more questions. I do want to thank everybody again for making time for this, and recommend, if you haven't done other webinars or seminars with the Women's Business Center, I recommend that you do. I see a hand up, Kule.
Yes. There was a question asked that says, is there data to support what the best franchise to own is?
No, I would say no. There's 3,800 franchises, and in the research process, you have the opportunity to really find out if it's a great match for you. And that's what's really critical. There are people that, that love, you name it, you name the franchise, there's people that are doing well. Most franchises are kind of like business. It's that bell curve that we hear about. I don't know why I'm getting my colleague's picture popping up on there. Let me, the bell curve that we've all probably seen in business says that 20% are going to excel, be at the very top. 20% are going to be at the bottom and they're going to struggle. 60% are in the middle, which can mean that they're making a good living. They're not getting rich, but they're making what they consider a good living. Franchising, it's the same way. Even in the well-known franchises like the Chick-fil-A or the McDonald's or the hotel or there's a, you could name it, there's 3,800. The bell curve, same thing happens. You've got 20% who do really great. And I tell people all the time, if they've had success throughout their life in their jobs, then they're probably going to be successful in franchising. I also would tell somebody, if they've always struggled in their career, they better figure out the reason why before they invest their money in any kind of business. So to answer you directly, I don't think there's one source that would say that this is the best franchise to own. I think you really have to go through the process where you have the opportunity to talk to people and find out, what kind of return they're getting on their investment, what they're doing every day, and whether they're enjoying their work. So I guess that's how I'd answer that question.
Thank you for that. And for everyone now, since we are at the end of the presentation, if you would like, feel free to go ahead and unmute to ask a question, since we are at the end.
Awesome. So first of all, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Tiana Barksdale, and I was so happy to be on this webinar today because it was very informative. And I just wanted to introduce myself and say thank you so much for putting this on and giving us the knowledge that we need, because I am a small business owner myself, and I'm just now getting out here and really getting to know about the resources that's out here. So you guys are doing an amazing job, and I appreciate you guys doing this so that we as business owners can learn and grow.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns from the crowd?
If I'll go back to my last screen one more time, if anybody does want to reach me, it's tfireman@frannet.com. Tfireman, just like it sounds. Frannet is 2 N's, FRANNET.
Okay, thank you so much. And for one question.